we're seeing rise of the nation state again. I think
Yes.
when people are struggling, they want to look after their own country, their own people. And I think that's actually natural if you look across history. And so I think that the more he pushes this globalist, progressive agenda, as he calls it, the more backlash we're going to have from the general public.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you agree, Phil?
yeah. Without any shadow of a doubt, you can't divide people. You can't brand people. People, for me, it was all triggered because I had a parishioner who came to me, who is approaching their 80s, traveled well around the world, support, well educated, paid their taxes, loved the nation, been a school teacher, contributed, done all the things that are the values of British national identity, and said, "I've just in tears, I've just been called far right," and it was just. And I sat in the office here. I sat in the vestry and just went, "This is just woefully, woefully wrong to take ordinary, decent people who care about their country."
And have done the right thing in life,
Yeah,
haven't they?
and some of these people, by the way, some of these people who literally fought the Nazis. Another political earthquake on the continent overnight. AfD, the low immigration alternative for Germany, got more votes than the three parties in the coalition government put together in the German local elections in the east, while doing incredibly well in Saxony too. Meanwhile, BSW, the left-wing low immigration party, which just launched, went straight into double digits too. So without going into the intricacies of German politics, just trust me when I say this signifies the start of a revolution against the woke ruling classes that have imported the third world into nation states for decades and expect the native European population to sit back and do or say nothing. And they expect us to do that, and the Germans to do that, even when members of ISIS are allowed into the country illegally to stab dead innocents at a music festival. So, of course, the mainstream media say such a revolution is far right. So lazy, aren't they? Like this front page splash from The Times, shamefully invoking the Nazis. Kathy Gingell from Conservative Woman, she's actually here later this week, raged about that front page. Shame on The Times. What a shocking and unwarranted and deliberately smearing headline. But the usual suspects, they continue with this lazy narrative in order to do anything possible to divert from actually discussing the issues. Like the race baiting, failed First Minister of Scotland, Humza Useless, who posted on X, a party steeped in xenophobia, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is winning state elections in Germany. Europe is witnessing a rising tide of far-right populism with hatred of Muslims and migrants being the driving force. We must confront their hateful ideology before it is too late. I mean, I have loads I could say to that, but I actually wanted to share a response from our brilliant guest from last week, the academic and media sensation Gad Saad, who replied, "Is Islam steeped in any xenophobia and Jew hatred? I ask because I see innumerable Islamic countries where the religious minorities have completely disappeared, especially the Jewish ones. Could you elaborate, O noble Muslim?" But look, the reality is the demonization of ordinary folk, people who are concerned about mass immigration, people who are concerned about losing control of our borders and losing our culture, demonizing us as far right, as Germany and as France proves, it just isn't going to work anymore. It isn't going to cut it. There is nothing far right about wanting to stop the boats, stop mass immigration now, and deport the rapists, thieves, and terrorists who have entered our country under completely false pretenses. And in the UK, I believe that is only going to strengthen one man. One man who finally got an office in Westminster today.
Good Lord. Day one, I've actually got an office. You know what this means? I'll spend less time in the bar.
And he needs to. Nigel, less time in the bar, please, because you've got a political revolution to lead. And Reform UK's chairman, Zia Youssef, said in a major interview with The Independent today that the party will be inspired by the right-wing revolution going on the continent, especially in France, but also Germany. So this is what he said. We are a very different party from them, and that is true, but we live in unprecedented times and we have 5 years, not 2, to double our vote. It's Deputy Leader Richard Tice, bullish as well.
There's a reason why they were sent to prison in the first place. And the concept of people now being let out after serving, it appears sometimes a mere 1/5, just 20% of the length of their sentence, so that they can bang up people who may have put out something daft and ill-advised on social media. I mean, it's completely dystopian. It's completely terrifying. As I say, we're 8 or 9 weeks in to this growing, darkening nightmare. And yes, I mean, I think you look at the polls, Labour are collapsing in the polls. Keir Starmer's personal approval rating is collapsing in the polls. Reform UK, we're going up in the polls. We're setting up hundreds of branches in Labour heartland areas and other target areas. So we're getting ready. That's the reality as we head towards conferencing.
Yeah.
Indeed, Zia Youssef, Reform's chairman, who I mentioned, said in that interview that a number of people from the Conservative Party's CCHQ, that's their main headquarters, which have done a terrible job, have reached out to him, saying that the Tories' bureaucracy is corrupted. And sadly, based on the Tory leadership contest, I am fast losing all faith with the party I previously supported. Now, the favourite, Kemi Badenoch, she launched her campaign today with, as usual, tough words.
This was one of our mistakes. We talked right but governed left, sounding like Conservatives but acting like Labour. Government should do fewer things but better, and what it does, it should do with brilliance. Second, I believe in citizenship. Citizenship is not just about having a passport. It is a commitment to a country and the people in it. A country belongs to its citizens. It is nothing without them. We cannot treat their needs or concerns as secondary or inconvenient or of a lower priority than anyone else's. People should not be made to feel guilty for questioning levels of immigration, legal or illegal, if it is changing the place they know and love. And government should not be shy of doing whatever it takes to change things. If people don't want their taxes to pay for foreign criminals to be in our jails or on our streets, those criminals should be removed. If they want local people to have priority for housing, for benefits, for school places, we must make that happen. Our country is not a dormitory for people just here to make money or a hotel for those passing through. It is our home and no one else will look after it. This was one of...
Okay, so that sounded good, right? Nothing that I disagree with there. But Kemi Badenoch was then asked what she actually wanted immigration to be cut to. Now, I'm very clear on this. I want net zero immigration. But Kemi had nothing specific to say.
We've had Robert Jenrick saying a cap of tens of thousands. We've had Tom Tugendhat saying a cap of 100,000. Can you give us some specifics in numbers and how you plan to deal with legal and illegal migration? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really glad you asked the migration question, because what you have said shows and illustrates quite well where things went wrong. We had a cap of tens of thousands when David Cameron came in. We need to ask ourselves, why didn't that work rather than just saying, we'll make another promise. Something went wrong there. So it's not just about throwing out numbers and throwing out targets. Something is wrong with the system. So I'm talking about the system. People who are throwing out numbers and saying, oh, well, we'll leave the ECHR and so on, are giving you easy answers. That is how we got in this mess in the first place. I'm not going to do that.
That's not good enough, I'm afraid, Ms. Badenoch. If you're not prepared to leave the ECHR, then you're not prepared to solve the problem. And while he's a very amenable bloke, I think he's a nice guy, there were also no specifics from the former Home Secretary James Cleverly, who used his launch today to unwisely publicly repudiate Nigel Farage, lumping him, I believe unfairly, in the same category as two-tier Keir Watch.
I don't accept the shared declinism of Starmer and Farage, who both believe that our best days are behind us. Starmer thinks it was better before we left the EU. Farage thinks it was better before we joined the EU. They're both wrong. I know that our best years can be ahead of us, but only if we replace this useless Labour government. And in order to win again, we need a leader who can unite the party, and I'm the best place to do that. Because I'm the best place to do that, because to command loyalty, you have to have displayed loyalty. And I have always served the leader of the day, never briefed against colleagues.
Your loyalty, though, should be to the people, your voters, the people who voted for Brexit because we wanted to control our borders. So look, I find this difficult to say, but the Conservatives look like a spent force. And I believe it's Reform UK that is now set to benefit from this right-wing revolution that we have seen sweeping Europe. And if you think such a revolution isn't possible here in the UK, you might be surprised. Because after 5 years of this utter shit show, Britons will finally have had enough. To react to that and all of the day's big stories, let me bring in my superstar panel. And today I am delighted to be joined once more by Dame Andrea Jenkyns, the former Education Secretary, who was the first Tory, actually, to have the guts to call for Sunak to go, if only her party had listened to her. We are also joined by the Reverend Canon Father Phil Harris, who recently went viral for his video on why it's no longer a bad thing to be called far right. And Father Phil, we keep getting this, don't we? The Times say, oh, this is the far right sweeping Germany again for the first time since the Nazis in the 1930s. It's nothing of the sort. It is nothing of the sort. All the folk who have voted for the AFD, I believe in the same way like the folk who have voted for Reform UK want, is their borders to be controlled, is an end to mass immigration, is an end to ISIS terrorists being illegally allowed into the country to then stab citizens who are innocently attending a music festival. But am I wrong?
No, you're not. This whole far right dystopian kind of phrase that's been bandied around is just becoming incredibly divisive and problematic. When we spoke last time, Dan, I think we were saying, those of us that are centrist and maybe centrist slightly right, because the left have gone so far left, we are now far right to them. And when in reality, democracy, rule of law, respect and tolerance and individual liberties are what we stand for, the things that are actually known as British national identity. And so by speaking up now and by branding us with this horrible term of far right, it just actually attempts to minimize a voice. It tries to lump everybody together, and it's just incredibly dangerous because the people that the governments have lost, and I'm talking about the current Labour government and, dare I say, the Conservative government previously, where they've lost the will, the people. They've lost the people, and they govern by consent. And the people have switched off after all the wranglings, particularly over Brexit. And I said before, it doesn't matter whether you were a Leave or a Remainer. The fact is, the will of the people was not enacted. And so people have switched off from politics. And in the last election, we saw people not going out and voting. And we're now left with this kind of vacuum where the majority of people are not listened to. And those people, as they speak up, get this wonderful phrase, far right. And I just find it offensive. And the kind of backlash I've had, particularly in Christian circles, where I thought in identifying, and saying I'm a far right priest according to Sir Keir Starmer, that would actually bring some common sense. What it's done is caused a backlash against me, for actually just trying to call out the madness of this phrase of far right.
Yeah, Dame Andrea Jenkins, what do you make of this far right phrase? Because I find like it's being used to try and demonize voters, and demonizing voters is never the way to win them over.
No, I completely agree, Dan. I think what we've seen even in the last 8 weeks that Labour's been in power, the double standards, the hypocrisy, and they are trying to just silence people. And if we look across what's going on in Germany, I mean, look at some of the things they stand for. I think Wiki called it welfare chauvinism, which means actually restricting welfare to the host citizens. They are pro-leave the EU. They want to control their borders. And I think people's had enough. And this just epitomizes that we are going to see a rise of, similar parties across Europe if people keep getting ignored.
Yeah. Indeed. And actually, let's just break down. Actually, Kathy Gingell did this for us from Conservative Women. She broke down the remarkable victory that ADF had in Eastern Germany. They won 32 of 88 seats in the Regions Parliament. That's 10 more seats than it had before. Second place to CDU, followed by this new, recently formed party, the Union for Reason and Justice, with 15 seats. 2 more parties entered the local parliament too, which showed just this massive turnoff from the Olaf Scholz party. And the 2 parties of the ruling federal coalition, Greens and the Free Liberals, failed to receive any seats at all. Turnout was 73.6%. So as she said, Father Phil, if that doesn't send a message to the woke and extremist ruling elites, I don't know what will.
No, but there's a warning in all of this, is there not, Dan? That politics and people's opinions previously had been, kind of seen centre, left, right. What we actually have now is a mishmash of policies that are grouped together, that you've got some views of far left, far right, and it's all become, so you look at some of the things that AFD stand for, which maybe are not palatable, but they're certainly not all far right. And so it's just, we've got left and right mixed together. What we have is extreme views. And I think that's the problem where it becomes very dangerous, is where ordinary people are being branded with having extreme views. And that becomes a significant problem. And I think if we look at all the characteristics of these parties that are springing up, you see some radical views in there as well as common sense views. The problem is people are just fed up, and they're fed up because there's no common sense. And no, well, indeed, there's not. And the thing is, you look at what Starmer had to say, and in fact, we've got this from last week, what he had to say about the far right. I mean, who's he talking about? Is he talking about the millions of people who voted for Reform UK? Is he really calling us far right? Because if so, that is disgusting, and it is declaring war on the working classes of Britain. But this is what he had to say.
I am worried about the far right. I'm worried about populism and nationalism and the politics of the easy answer, the snake oil, if you like. And I think it's very important that we have a debate about how we confront that. My own personal view is that through delivery, through showing that there are progressive democratic answers to the many challenges we face is the way forward. But yes, that's a discussion that I'm very keen to have because I think it's a very real threat. I am worried.
So Dame Andrea Jenkins, who's he talking about there? Nigel Farage?
I think all of us on this on the show, actually, Dan, and
probably
most of the
everyone
general
watching
public.
too. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd like to just pick up on Reverend Phil's point. I was going to use the words common sense. This is what people are crying out for. And Starmer's speech was spoken in the true form as a globalist would speak. I think people are sick of this progressive globalist agenda, and I think we're seeing rise of the nation state again.
Yes.
I think when people are struggling, they want to look after their own country, their own people. And I think that's actually natural if you look across history. And so I think that the more he pushes this globalist, progressive agenda, as he calls it, the more backlash we're going to have from the general public.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Phil?
Yeah, without any shadow of a doubt. You can't divide people. You can't brand people. People, for me, it was all triggered because I had a parishioner who came to me, who is approaching their 80s, traveled well around the world, well educated, paid their taxes, loved the nation, been a school teacher, contributed, done all the things that are the values of British national identity, and said, in tears, I've just been called far right. And it was just, and I sat in the office here, I sat in the vestry and just went, this is just woefully wrong to take ordinary, decent people who care about their country.
And have done the right thing in life, haven't they?
And some of these people, by the way, who literally fought the Nazis for this country are now being branded far right. It's actually disgusting.
And Dan, sorry, I just mentioned this one point. The backlash in Germany also is down to look at the ghettos of illegal migrants and the rising crime, including rape, including violence. So this is a backlash to uncontrolled illegal migration. So I think we've really got to keep an eye on what's going on here next, to be honest with you.
Well,
because,
of course we do. Of course we do, because it's like
completely
nothing to see here. There's not migrants coming over and raping and stabbing young women. There's not migrants coming over and launching stabbing attacks on individuals at festivals from the mainstream media. But we know it's happening. You can't hide the truth from us for too long. But first, guys and girls, you know this is the best time of the year, right? Football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK, in the US, NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays, and with that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineup. So this is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the group chat. You know, I've been there. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. That's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue nose and ear hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that will keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. Clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. And then let me tell you about this, the Weed Whacker 2.0, because we've got to be honest here, no one wants a surprise nose or air hair making a guest appearance on game day. So the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. And look at it there, what a product. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes with 2 free gifts. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. Use the code OUTSPOKEN for 20% off today. That is 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. But of course, there is another threat, I would argue, far bigger than the so-called far right, and it's the sectarian politics which is entering the UK. And quite an extraordinary announcement breaking right now from Jeremy Corbyn. Let me read this to you from The Guardian. He is to form an official parliamentary alliance with 4 independent MPs who were elected on pro-Gaza platforms, issuing a call for more MPs to join. Now, the group will have the same number of MPs as Reform UK and the Democratic Unionist Party, which each have 5 MPs, more than the Greens and Plaid Cymru, promising to fight austerity and campaign on issues including the winter fuel allowance and arms sales to Israel. The group explicitly invited MPs to join them. So Corbyn, he is of course the independent MP for Islington North, and he is going to be joined by the MPs Shaukat Adam, Ayub Khan, Adnan Hussein and Iqbal Muhammad. So this is now a far left, let's just be honest about what it is, Father Phil, an Islamic bloc in Westminster, which is something that Nigel Farage warned of for a long time. Sectarian politics, Muslim politics entering Westminster, and was told he was crazy. And look at where we are in 2024.
Yes. Can I just be a priest for 10 seconds?
Please.
So just being the priest for 10 seconds, we see kind of quoted and put out there of this great this verse from Leviticus that talks about the stranger who dwells among you and welcoming the stranger and the sojourner and the foreigner. Now, I would just love somewhere for a Christian minister to unpack that properly, because the people that came into the nation of Israel that's talking about, and by the way, when Israel left Egypt, a number of Egyptians went with them. And what they had to do was adapt to the customs of Israel. And so the sojourner had to keep, for instance, the Sabbaths and the Passovers and follow the Jewish religion. And so what we actually have now is a scenario where we are welcoming people in. And can I just be very clear here? If there is a genuine refugee, I want to help them. All of my life, and in terms of ministry, I have been in the last 3 years working with India as an example, and I've been in India and Africa, and people are calling me racist and that's deeply sectarian and problematic. And all that I'm saying is, if people come to this nation, we actually talk about respect and tolerance and individual liberties, and so we should. But there is a responsibility for people who come to the nation to abide by our laws and not try to set up their own laws, and actually adopt the British way of life, just like the foreigner and the stranger and the sojourner had to do so when they arrived in the land of Israel, in the nation of Israel. And the Houses of Parliament, right in the centre of the floor there in the central lobby, and Dame Andrea will know this, is in Latin. There is a verse that says, unless the Lord builds the house, those that do so labour in vain. And so from my point of view, what we have now seemingly is an agenda. Now, let me be clear, I am not anti-Muslim, I am anti-radical Islam. And there's a difference there.
No, there is a critical difference, but Andrea, at the end of the day, from a political point of view, surely this new party, organization, I mean, however you want to put it, is designed to push Labour further to the left on these issues because they are worried about losing the Muslim vote.
Oh, completely. And I think that we'll see they will go even more to the left because what Starmer sees is that Farage and Reform are hot on their tails, and they don't want to hemorrhage any more votes to independents as they've seen in that group. But it clearly is a group which wants to obliterate Israel, in my view, and that should be called out, Dan. If it was in any other religion trying to do this with another religion, we would not accept it. But I mean, I'd say about Corbyn, though, I mean, I'll say this in jest, but have we not got the Communist Party of Great Britain under Labour? He could easily join them, couldn't he?
Yes, in some ways he would fit in quite well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You agree, Father?
Oh, you know, the anti-Semitism piece, and if anybody looks me up, that they will see how pro-Israel I am. And another point that I will make here, I don't see how a Christian cannot be, because we're based on Judeo-Christian values. And there is this complete... Exactly, Andrea. They are, and so we have democracy, and we're constantly pulling down democracy. And you know, I spent for 10 years, you know, a month every year in Israel. And I have people having spats with me online, and I go, well, when was the last time you was in Israel? Because I was in there just the month before the war happened. And I happen to be a trustee of Christian holy sites in Israel. And so when I hear people kind of spouting anti-Semitism and just the hate, and Gad Said brilliantly put it in the tweet, you know, when we actually look at all the Muslim nations where Jews were and are no longer because they've been pushed. And then we have, dare I say, church leaders who are pro-Palestine, and I'm not going to particularly get into that, but the home and birthplace of Christ was 83% Christian before Islam took over, and it's now 8% Christian. In Gaza, prior to the war, there was about 700 to 800 Christians, and a number of years ago there were 5,000 Christians. You know, so this is a massive problem to me. And let me just reiterate, I don't have a problem with individual Muslims. I have a problem with radical Islam.
Can I bring a point as well, actually, Dan?
Please.
When I was an MP for, you know, the Leeds area, some Jewish students contacted me, and I met with a Jewish council, etc. And let's not forget that Corbyn has got a massive student following. But the anti-Semitism that they faced in the University of Leeds, in the main communal areas, they was allowed to put the Palestinian flag. There was openly, you know, from the rivers to the sea was chanted. I got told how even the students, certain lecturers was against them and putting stuff on social media. So with Starmer now cancelling the freedom of speech bill in universities, I think this is a dangerous tipping point now, actually, for Jewish students and the Jewish community in Britain, unfortunately.
It is really terrifying times. I do want to talk quickly about the Conservative leadership and show you this video of Kemi Badenoch, the favourite, who is saying that she is going to take on those folk like Doctor Who, David Tennant, trying to shut her up. Watch this.
Until we wake up and Kemi Badenoch doesn't exist anymore, I don't wish ill of her, I just wish her to shut up.
No, I will not shut up. When you have that type of cultural establishment trying to keep conservatives down, you need someone like me who's not afraid of Doctor Who or whoever, and who's going to take the fight to them and not let them try and keep us down. That's not going to happen with me.
So, Dame Andrea, great messaging there, very slick. But the problem that I had with Ms. Badenoch today at the campaign launch, as I pointed out in my digest, the moment she was asked for a specific when it came to immigration numbers, she went back to the mumbo jumbo. She went back to saying it's not appropriate to leave the ECHR. So, actually, is she going to do anything different?
She's not. I mean, I've obviously been in Parliament with her those last several years. And what was interesting, how she used that quote, sounding like a Conservative but acting like Labour. Her voting record is actually like that. And remember, she was tasked with ripping up EU law. She did a terrible job. The amount of laws that are still on the statute for Labour to allow further closer alignment. So I blame her for that. But also, if you look, she made that speech about citizenship. I recall that Gove made a similar speech about citizenship back in 2007. You might want to look into that, actually, Dan, because I remember that particularly because that's when I joined the party around that time. So, we're here that she's meant to be an heir to Gove. It's worth looking in that. But the thing is with Kemi, what you see is not what you get. She's great at the rhetoric, at the wokey stuff, but there's nothing behind there. There's
so you're
no
not a
grit.
fan. You're not a fan.
Oh, not whatsoever. I've seen her. I've seen her in Parliament. She's voted for more net zero. She's pro-EU. And do you know what I find quite staggering, Dan? She was on the London Assembly. She was also a councillor in London. You look, prior to 2016, her footprint online has been wiped. Her footprint prior to Brexit has been wiped. Why is that? Who's cleaned up her footprint online?
Fascinating. Wow. Father Phil, any of these folk running for the Conservative leadership who you think could save the party? There they all are.
I'm going to just go pass if I can.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't mind coming in on this actually, Dan.
Because you're pro-pretty, aren't you?
Well, I'm pro-pretty because literally, she's having to a little bit at the moment play things carefully because don't forget about 80% of the Conservative MPs are the One Nation group. So for her to get through to the next stage, she's got to, play a fairly, straight bat where that's concerned. However, she's a Spartan who voted against all the awful Brexit deals. Yeah, she voted against the Windsor Framework, which was Rishi chefed in Northern Ireland, and she's a Thatcherite Conservative. She's brilliant. Now, if she doesn't get through to the next round, which I'll be very sad about, I really hope she does, then we need to look at the ones that's left. But I think that she can actually stand up to Starmer. And look, she's been in politics longer than anyone there. She's been a Conservative, and don't forget, she also Jimmy Goldsmith's party all those years ago. She campaigned with them to leave. She's a truth actually Conservative.
Yeah, what was it? Was it the Referendum Party? Is that what?
That was it. Yes,
that was it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, goodness, when it comes to her Brexit credentials, perfect, absolutely perfect. Yeah. But she doesn't want to leave ECHR, and I've got a big problem with that. I'm sorry, I do.
Look, I had a petition. I came on your old show, Dan, didn't I? To talk about it, where over 50,000 signatures. We must leave the ECHR. Now, I think that is the only way. Jenrick's coming out with some good stuff.
But he's my favourite at the moment. But let's see.
But it's a bit like a born again Christian to me. It's been shown these credentials since.
Yes, but Father Phil will say it's always possible to be born again, isn't it, Father Phil? Come on.
But I do like Robert. I want his PPS, and I just want somebody who will bring back conservatism. Yeah. Now, I hope Pretty can do that. If she doesn't, then I look at who next. Cleverly, nice guy, but like he said, has been loyal, but is also does not challenge the civil servant stand. As you know, I was in the education department with him. It was just all very much a loving. I didn't see any challenging of civil servants, and we don't want anybody like that at this stage. No, I like him as a guy,
the problem is
he will not set the world alight.
Yeah, the problem is the party has to realise a revolution is required, and Jenrick is the only one who is talking that language. I appreciate his voting record, I don't necessarily trust, but I like the fact he is talking that language. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.